Hello, everyone. I'm Byron Connolly, Head of Programs at Adapt, and today I'm joined by Dr. Michael Collo. Michael is the CEO at a company called Evolved AI. Now, Evolved AI is an organisation that helps companies get the most out of their generative AI implementations, their Gen AI implementations, from providing workshops for executives to use case development, piloting, and custom-built software. Now, Michael is speaking at CIO Edge next month, and today he joins me for a chat. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Great to have you here. Now, Michael, Gen AI is clearly a breakthrough technology. Most enterprises have tested and piloted these tools at the very least as they became popular throughout 2023. Now, from your experience at Evolved AI, how does the deployment of Gen AI tools stack up against other priorities, often competing priorities, across Australian organisations? Do tech leaders and others across the C-suite need to be paying more attention to Gen AI, or is it mostly hype at the moment?
I think that's a great question. And I think the answer almost certainly relies upon which industry that you're in and what your business is, essentially. Gen AI is a very specific kind of tool. It's very, very powerful for applications of language. It's anything to do with creating documents, forms, reporting, translation, anything to do with that kind of form of communication. Again, customer service would be one example, and so on. So for certain kinds of companies, that's really the bread and butter of what they do. And they spend either a lot of money in their cost base doing it, or they offer it as a service. And for them, they've certainly had to bring on Gen AI very quickly and move it to that top 3 kind of prioritization, because not only is it good for them in terms of saving money, but it's also one of those things where if they don't, they'll be left behind by their peers. And so there's competitive pressures for them to do so. I think for other companies where it's not obvious that it's the top 3. So, for example, things like cybersecurity has taken up a lot of our time and bandwidth, I think, over the last 6 to 12 months. Sure. Part of the cybersecurity conversation has been certainly around Gen AI as well. I think for those companies, they look at it as a kind of a productivity uplift. They see their staff using it, especially the younger ones. They're kind of a little bit cautious about it. Some companies have banned it, most haven't. And so they're trying to essentially figure out how they can just help that process along organically and get their staff to use it safely and carefully, don't give away any secrets or whatever else, but essentially just to kind of get that 20-30% productivity uplift.
Yeah. Have we seen many organisations actually get that in Australia yet? Are there organisations in particular industries that you think are leading the charge? Because we want Gen AI to make a real impact in the coming years for the efficiencies benefits that you've just described. But are there any particular industries or companies that are leading the charge at the moment? And why would they be leading the charge, do you think?
I think it's a great question. I think, first of all, publicly, you don't see much of it in the papers or else. I think the coverage of AI last year was kind of oscillating between heavy hype. This is going to change everything all the time for everybody. 300 million workers impacted across Europe and the US. There was a paper that was given out by Goldman Sachs. It induced lots of fear. And then on the other side, very kind of risk aversion, AI ethics, kind of finger wagging at this thing called AI. So I think in the background, there's almost every company that I speak to has projects that are exploring use cases or particular kinds of ideas in this space. What I've seen, which has been surprising to me, is unlike previous generations of technology or AI, where usually the small businesses get left behind and the big businesses are the ones with more resources and teams. In this particular case, you've actually seen a lot more of that small, mid-sized companies going out there and experimenting and trying different things, using ChatGPT, using something else, and actually getting quite good at it. And so some of the masterclasses we've run last year, we ran them all around the country, and we would have people in the room from 25 to 75. And these were people that were part of small businesses, for 5 to 10 person businesses. In this particular case, financial services, so quite specific, financial advisory, that kind of stuff. And so they were certainly using it to do a lot of documentation, to do a lot of shortcutting, or just to do ad hoc stuff, things that you don't think will take you a long time. You've got to respond to an email from a supplier, from a vendor, from a regulator, from someone else, and you want to make sure you get it right. And it's going to kind of take you 45 to an hour, but with this system, it takes you 15 minutes. So those kinds of incremental small time savings. I think with the bigger companies, we've seen For example, the news that came out last year from CBA was very positive about embracing AI. I think they've had a long-standing AI program. In fact, I know that they have, and they've used different forms of AI for many different things in that organization. So for me, those kinds of organizations, Gen AI is just another sheet or another kind of slice of that pie that they've already been eating. And so they're kind of just blending it in with the rest of them. But I would say that one of the things that stumped companies and has kind of been a little bit difficult is probably two things. One is that Gen AI is not something that you create. Most companies have not created their own language model. They've taken it off the shelf. Sure. So that means that it comes with a whole bunch of different things. It comes with certain capabilities, but also comes with certain weaknesses. And you really have to go and explore those yourself. And so for a lot of companies, that means experimentation. That means actually trying different things, taking a bit of risk. And certainly when you speak to board of directors and executives, they're a lot more risk averse about this kind of activities. They're kind of wondering what to do about it. I think the next part of it has been the regulatory uncertainty. That's been a very important part. There's been lots of talk from Europe and the US about regulating high risk, what they term as high risk AI systems. And Australia is now following suit. That there's kind of there's this initiative from Ed Husic around this whole idea. And again, probably taking a leaf out of Europe's page on what is high risk and how it should be regulated. So for a lot of companies, I think the board of directors, executives have kind of sat back and said, look, it's probably going to be okay. We don't quite know what format this technology is going to unfold in. We can see it's going to be very, very powerful. So we're going to start letting people do use cases. And we expect probably to be doing much more work, for example, this year, 2024, 2025, when we've got some use cases, we've got some regulatory certainty, and we know what the benefits are going to look like. And so now it's really time to go and execute.
Yeah, indeed. Totally agree with that. Now, as I understand it, and tell me if I'm wrong, Michael, you feel that human misunderstanding around the technology means there's too much hype about its capabilities and people often overestimate its potential. Can you tell us what you mean by that? What don't people understand about these tools at the moment?
So it's a great question, and there's a very long answer to this, so I'll try to summarize it in very brief terms. We've never had in the history of humanity, I'm knock on wood here because it's been a pretty long history, and I'm not sure I know all of it, a kind of an algorithm or a system that has mastered language. Language has always been innately human. There's no animals on Earth that speak language to the level that we do. If you hear the language being spoken in whatever tongue, English or French or German, the assumption is that there's a human being at the other end talking to you about it. And the assumption is that they understand the world, they understand, gravity, they maybe understand logic and reasoning and so on and so on. And so there's always assumption behind somebody explaining something to you or talking to you in a particular language. Now, these algorithms have mastered these types of languages to the point of like maybe an IQ of 140, so linguistic equivalent of 140, so really capable. And so our assumption is that whenever we're talking online to an algorithm, that there should be some kind of a person-like characteristics behind them. They should know all these things, right? As well as being, if they can use language, they should already know something about, basic mathematics, statistics, anything that we as human beings would know. And in fact, that's not the case. So these algorithms are really good at this sleeve of competency, which is language transformation. It doesn't mean that they can do a bunch of other things around them. So there's been a bunch of tests that have been done in the US, and I found that there was a study that was a really good one coming out, I think Harvard or MIT, and it was really talking about this idea of what they termed as the jagged frontier. And the jagged frontier meant that certain tasks the language models were really good at, and certain things that we think they should be good at as well, because they were good at this, they should be good at that, they were really rubbish at. And so actually, it wasn't like a human being's ability where you would interview somebody and say, well, you seem to be good at writing reports. Maybe you can write for me something else over here. And that should be transferable. In fact, with these language models, it wasn't the case. And that's not unexpected because it's very early stage. But what it has meant is that people have overestimated, that they've kind of assumed that because these language models can string a sentence together, they can sound compelling, they can be empathetic, that they have any feelings, or that they understand the world, or that they're intelligent in ways beyond us. And in fact, in many cases, it's just not the case, and that's not been proven. So certainly when we talk to companies, we take a much more pragmatic viewpoint. We say, these are tools that you deploy. You have to test very carefully the capability of the tool. Don't assume anything, and don't necessarily buy into this kind of futuristic hype of super intelligence going to take over the world.
Yeah.
Just look at what it is. It's just a really good thing for communication, report writing, and those kinds of human activities.
Yeah, and I think that people that understand that are going to get the most use out of these tools as they stand today. Now, at Edge next month, you're going to be talking about who should own AI capabilities and adoption. And this is important because at the end of the day, as we say, it's about people. Should it be the CIO? Should it be the head of data? Should it be somebody else? I mean, I spoke to an exec the other day who said business owners across organizations who have identified certain processes that will benefit from automation should really be driving these projects. What are your thoughts here?
So this is actually an old question. It's not necessarily about Gen AI. I think it's been around for a while, especially for medium to large size organizations. And there's and this is what I'll be talking about as well at the conference. There's a kind of a dichotomy between having a centralized model, decentralized. The decentralized model is the one that you describe, where you've got individual business owners. They are responsible essentially for mini P&Ls. And if they want to use technology and roll it out across their teams, they fight for their budget, they get it, they support it, they manage those teams, etc. That works for certain organizations that are siloed or that are specialist enough. It works very well for certain banks and other financial institutions as well, for example. On the other hand, the centralized model allows for much more control across what is in the enterprise, governance, risk, and also to stop overlaps and things like that. So I suspect it's one of those ideas where you need to have a centralized team that supports a piece of complex technology like an AI system or adoption or something else, because things change over time. Models update, your problems changes, things break down, etc. You need support, you need validation, you need expertise. But in terms of the economic value that is driving, which often we are very poor at measuring and keeping our eye on, that has to be owned by the business owner, because that's ultimately the value stream that the company realizes. So the ideal case is that there's some kind of a service agreement in place whereby absolutely there's a business owner or business unit that says, we need this form of automation, we need this form of AI in order to do our business better. We think this will save us or make us $5 to $10 million a year. And we're willing to resource or help resource 2-3 members of a centralized team that will maintain this for us, upkeep it, improve it over time, and all that kind of stuff, either internal to the company or external, to be frank, because a lot of technologies in the past have used external vendors or suppliers to do that kind of maintenance for them. And so I think ultimately, especially with language models, it's a very good point. Most of the Gen AI projects, I think, have folded into the CTO domain, and they've gone to the technology officer or CIO domain with the view that it's data and it's technology. Actually, it's not data and technology. It's literally a model that you take off the shelf and then you deploy it. And so the ability to do that successfully is mostly dependent upon your business awareness or understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. It's nothing to do with new infrastructure. It's nothing to do with new cloud. It's nothing to do with lots of plumbing. And so I think it's a lot of organizations have misunderstood what Gen AI is and kind of bucketed into the more broad data kind of bucket, because it kind of feels in that family. Yeah. But actually, it's a very, very different beast altogether.
Yeah. Michael, that's all we've got time for. It's going to be a very interesting 2024 and the years beyond as well around AI and Gen AI specifically. Looking forward to seeing you next month at Adapt Edge, and thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much.